What's up, everybody? It is Monday, and it's time for Master Motivation. My name is Jason Flame, and today we're joined by our special guest, Mr. Bryan Nann. How's it going?
Going great, Jason. Good to see you.
Good to see you as well. We were just kind of talking pre-interview, and I wish that I would have made more of an attempt to reach out to you while I was out in Arizona. Could have caught up a little bit more, but we'll have a good hour of conversation today at least.
Yeah, and you know where to find me. You're welcome to reach out to me anytime you're in Phoenix.
Yeah. Well, that's awesome. Hey, just to remind everybody that's watching the video now and we'll watch it later, this will stream on our YouTube channel and Facebook page. But, this whole video series started out as kind of, I don't know, kind of a goal for 2021. I sat back in 2020, as I always do, and just kind of set out some new goals for the new year. And as I was scrolling through Facebook and social media, at times it could be a little bit negative and dark and not so fun. So I said, well, hey, let's do something fun and motivating, positive, exciting. And I said, I probably have 50 or 100 people I know that I could interview, and it would be great for people to hear some of our stories, some of our background. You've accomplished a lot, not only in the martial arts but in the business world, and so I'm just looking forward to sharing your story with everybody else to bring some extra motivation on Monday. So our first encounter, well, my first memory of you actually is I believe it was 1986, towards middle to end of 86, I think. It was the first or second martial arts ballet that Mr. Ichikawa put on, and you were the ninja, right?
I was the ninja. Yes, yes.
You were the ninja. That was my first encounter, just kind of as a young kid starting out in martial arts and watching, people like you and David Cox and Mark Cox and Steve Clark, Tiffany Wing. Just so many names that I'm sure we'll kind of touch base on some of the stories. But, we got a little bit closer as I was getting ready for my black belt. And, you were probably the primary instructor that gave me private lessons as a red belt moving up towards my black belt, and someone that took a lot of time with me and took me under your wing, so to speak. As a matter of fact, most people that know our studio, and we've changed our name since in the last couple of years, but the original name of our martial arts school was Tang Soo Do University, and that name came directly from you because I remember having a conversation in Agora Hills in the Jack in the Box parking lot in your car, and you're showing me this brochure of this school that you wanted to open called Tang Soo Do University, and I had, I was honored that you asked me to be an instructor. And in the end, that kind of went in a different direction because you ended up moving to Georgia and doing some things there. But a lot of people don't know that you're the guy that came up with the name Tang Soo Do University, and I just kind of carried it out.
So truth be told, we got to give, since you're giving credit where credit's due. So yes, Tang Soo Do University was, and then of course you remember Black Belt University was my school. But I do have to give credit to Terry Brumley out in Memphis, Tennessee, because I think he started the concept of, and it was Taekwondo University,
Right.
and he pirated his name, that name to bring it to Tang Soo Do, but and then the broader spectrum Black Belt University. But I see what you've done with your schools, and I think it's phenomenal. And I'm very proud to see what you've taken that name and taken it to a whole new level.
Yeah, it was when I first opened, we started there, and then as we transitioned into bringing more Krav Maga into our program and being really involved in the community, we thought that a brand switch or a brand update was due, and it just kind of fit to change over to more part karate and Krav Maga. But another thing that you brought to the table for me was that you were the first person to introduce me to jujitsu, and more of the Japanese style of jujitsu than what we all know as Brazilian jiu-jitsu now. You did a lot of training outside of Tang Soo Do. I remember, you and Mark made weapons. Exotic Weapons International, I think was the name. Was that right?
That is the company that Mark Cox and I started. Yeah.
Yeah. So that was a good time. You brought so much to the table for me as a martial artist, and I think that you were the bridge between Mr. Cox and I. Really working together and training together because I got an opportunity to teach there in 90. I'm going to say it was 93 because I was a second degree black belt. And so, and we kind of did some training over there, and then I stuck around and taught some more. But, enough about me and what's going on in my life. Let's get back to you and talk about your just kind of your beginnings. Talk a little bit about, maybe childhood growing up, and then we'll maybe talk a little bit more about your education. You grew up in the Valley, right?
I did. Yeah, I grew up in San Fernando Valley. In fact, Reseda. So, I've heard enough Karate Kid jokes for a lifetime, I think. But, yeah. Um, I was probably 12, 13 years old when I first got exposed to martial arts. A good friend of mine named Russ Fuller actually exposed me to a guy named Eric Lee, who, if you're familiar with Eric Lee, I got a chance to meet him. And of course, I became fascinated with martial art. Bruce Lee, Eric Lee, and all those people really were what got me interested in martial arts. And fast forward to Dennis Ichikawa, right? Mr. Ichikawa. I met him 1980, 1981 maybe, and Tarzana karate, and that's where I really started my training. And amazing experience. I feel extremely fortunate to have been exposed to some fantastic martial artists throughout my life. So from Grandmaster Ichikawa to Pat Johnson to Tadashi Yamashita to Mike Stone. You mentioned Jujitsu. I was fortunate to have trained directly with George Kirby for a while of AJA, the AJA founder. I've had a great, lifetime of martial arts exposure.
Yeah, no, a lot. And let's. I want to talk a little bit more about what it was like to grow up in the Valley. And Reseda is so much different then than it is now. But what do you remember most about the San Fernando Valley?
Oh gosh, growing up in the Valley, I mean, it was back at a time when you can go out and bike ride until sundown, at night, hang out with friends around the neighborhood. I mean, it was a different time. I spent a tremendous amount of time outside, out and about in the neighborhood, between elementary, junior high, high school. I grew up in an era that they referred to as kind of the latchkey kids. So both of my parents worked. So, I was actually a skinny kid. So, being skinny, red-haired, freckle face, and look kind of like Opie from the Andy Griffith Show, or Carrot Top, I think is probably the closest to what people can relate to today. I got picked on a lot. So, part of my parents' motivation for getting me into martial arts was being able to defend myself. So, and then by high school, I went to Reseda High School. So in those days, that's during the era of what they called school integration, where mandatory busing and that type of thing. So, we truth be told, we saw some fair amount of kind of gang related activities. I went to high school with Bloods and Crips, and the guy that had a 32 caliber pistol in his locker next to me, and, somebody getting stabbed at the homecoming dance and that type of thing. So that's the darker side of things that happen in the Valley. But the bright side is, as a kid, you could play outside at night and be okay. So
Right. Yeah. I mean, I think a lot of people, from that time can relate to, you were just outside all the time. I mean, it was riding your bikes or going to a friend's house, and like you could pretty much go as far as you could still hear your parents whistle, or whatever it was that they said to get home for dinner. And when the lights came on, that's when we knew it was time to go. It definitely was it was different, because I know that my kids don't even understand what that's like. Like, I mean, they're 19 and 16 now, and I don't think that they just went outside and rode their bike to their friend's house across town ever. So yeah, it is a lot different. What did you do as far as sports and activities before martial arts? Did you play any sports or get involved in any activities at school?
I tried. You know, yes. So Mark Cox probably didn't get into it, but we were actually on a flag football league for many years during my high school days, and another really good friend of mine, Ty Wilcox, who was kind of an All-American at Semi High, and he played football, basketball. So we did that together for many years. You know, my brother was the baseball player in the family. He played baseball in college and wanted to go pro and that type of thing. But I never naturally acclimated to, you know, kind of the traditional sports, baseball, football, basketball. I love playing basketball, but at 5'9", you know, basketball just wasn't in the cards.
Right, right.
So, and 5'9" might even be a stretch. But you know, nothing felt as natural as martial arts did in terms of physical, you know, physical exercise. So
Hmm.
I just I took to that more than everything else, you know.
And so, how old were you when you first got involved in martial arts?
Well, when I officially started training with Dennis Ichikawa, I was 13.
13. Okay. And you hadn't done any martial arts other than, watching Bruce Lee and stuff on TV prior to that.
You know, the backyard stuff. So, like I said, you know, my buddy had trained with Eric Lee for a while.
Mhm.
He taught me some stuff, but it was, yeah, it was all backyard, you know, amateur hour, right? That kind of thing.
Right, right, right. And so you started with Mr. Chikawa. Now, did you train at the very first Tarzana karate before he moved it over to where it was on Ventura and Shirley, or was that where you started?
No, I started, no. So I was, yeah, I was I guess probably that next generation, right? After he moved to Ventura and Shirley. And I think if I remember right, my black belt number was 70.
Mm.
So, you know, there was 69 people that had gotten their black belt under Dennis Ichikawa, either at that school or at the old school down in Sherman Oaks.
And who were some of the black belts? And you mentioned a couple names before. You talked about Mike Stone. I know one of the people from the Sherman Oaks days. Who were some of the other black belts that you trained with, or some of your first instructors along with Mr. Chikawa?
Um, you talking about the trained under Ichikawa or?
Or anybody else that you trained with at that time, really?
Well, like I said, I was fortunate enough. Mike Stone ended up teaching at Tarzana Karate for about 2 years. So we spent about 2 years. Mark Hawks, myself, several other people. I mean, I was a 15-year-old red belt when he was there teaching. Learned a tremendous amount from him. You know, Pat Johnson was periodically a guest instructor, who, as you know, is Dennis Ichikawa's instructor. So I got to get some good one-on-one training from Pat Johnson. In fact, at one point, I took over some of his private students, and I was teaching some of Pat Johnson's students because he was too busy making movies at the time. And
Right.
so Tadashi Yamashita, who was I think a personal friend of Mr. Chikawa's. George Kirby. So when I was studying jujitsu, my actual instructor was a guy by the name of Tevis Sims, and he was a black belt under George Kirby. So we would periodically go to Burbank Park and Rec and train directly with George Kirby in his class. And then when I moved to Arizona, I spent about 5 years training in Hung Fai Wing Chun. So I got to train under Garrett Gee. If you're familiar with the kung fu, kind of the well-known kung fu instructors, Garrett Gee is a pretty well-known
Hmm.
grandmaster up in the Bay Area.
Right on. So Mike Stone was that's a big name, right? Because that's someone who had a lot of success in the tournament world back in the 70s, early 80s. Who were some of the black belts that I might remember? I know I remember Tevis, as a matter of fact. I remember when you were training with him. I met him a couple times. Very interesting dude. he was
Yes.
It was yeah, that was a fun time. But who were I mean, Tiffany Wing was training, Conrad Ercolano, a lot of those same people that ended up both teaching at Tarzana Karate and then moving over to T.O. Westlake Karate when he opened that school. What are some of your greatest memories of training and testing and teaching in Tarzana?
Uh, yeah, influential people that you may know the names, you may not have directly interacted with. So Bob and Tom Block
Hmm.
uh, were very influential on me in my early martial arts days. In fact, Bob Block has the honor of having cracked a couple of my ribs with a back kick. So, but Jim Struck, you may have know that name.
Hmm.
Nickname was Struck the Truck. Big police officer. I think he's I can't remember, second and third degree black belt. We tested together. I think when I tested for first degree, I believe he tested for third. Um, here's a little 15-year-old kid, fighting a 6'2", bodybuilder police officer. Anyway, that was an interesting experience. Um, let's see, Mac Moncrief, Ron Pinnell. I got a chance to work out with Ron Pinnell on a couple occasions. Um, Gosh, I mean, I guess I could go on and on. And Roger Lacombe, you probably know Roger Lacombe.
Hmm.
Uh, we, I think I can't remember what exactly the lineage with Roger is, but we worked out together, I think, a couple times. Um, let's see, there was just a lot of folks that I've come across over the years. That's kind of the short list, I guess.
Right, right. Yeah, well, I remember, a lot of those names. I know the Block brothers, were still around when, by the time I got there, they were on the black belt panel when I tested. I'll never forget my second degree test. I think it was my second degree. I had to fight both you and Mark. That was, as you said, interesting. It's funny what we think is interesting. What we really mean is we just got the shit kicked out of us, and we thought that was kind of fun because we survived.
Right.
Yeah,
Yeah.
those were good times. Yeah, a lot of great people. What were some of your best memories of testing and some of the things that you accomplished um, while you were training for your different degrees? Because you made it to fourth degree, and there's a big gap between your third and your fourth degree promotions. I remember that. But you always had something. You always had new stuff up your sleeve. It seemed like every time you tested, you kind of added a new element to what you were doing.
Yeah, and maybe I don't know. Maybe I have attention deficit disorder, or I liked infusing new ideas. But philosophically, Bruce Lee's thought process was very influential on me, and the whole idea of absorbing what's useful. And if you watch him, you watch his films, and of course, it's kind of funny to watch them now because they're archaic compared to modern movies. But the idea of mixed martial arts, right? The everything that we take for granted today, groundwork, elbows, just the whole mixed martial arts concept was really Bruce Lee popularized that long before any of these folks came around. So to me, that made sense to incorporate that into your fighting style, which is why, like the jujitsu and the aikido and in the grappling and the hapkido and all those different pieces, started. It made sense to incorporate that, and I got to give a lot of credit. So Farbor's as well, and I got to give a lot of credit to Farbor's because I think he was one of the early pioneers of taking Hapkido and integrating other things into it as well. And I think some of his students and himself, I picked up some Hapkido techniques along the way. So I got to again give respect where respect's due. But testing, so I would say the most significant, accomplishments or memories for me, the gap was you mentioned the big gap. So that was actually my fifth degree test that I did in 2011.
Okay.
So that was there was a big gap, and part of it was because I had gotten into the working corporate America working world, and I was so focused on that rank progression became kind of a secondary priority, and then part of me wanted to see if I could still do it. So it was one of those roll the Rocky montage music of getting back into shape right after being out of it for 10 years or so. Um, so that test to me was significant. I would say probably the one that folks like to talk about the most, and Mr. Ichikawa loves to talk about, is the test where I did one of the forms completely mirrored backwards to the point where the panel didn't even know that I had done it going the wrong way. That has taken on kind of a legend of its own, I think. But to this day, I'm not sure how I did that.
Yeah, it's funny because I believe it was Pyongan Odon, because that's like a story that just kind of comes up quite a bit. Mr. Chikawa has definitely talked about it a lot. I bring it up even to my students. Sometimes when we're doing black belt class and we want to mix things up, instead of going to the left, go to the right, and your name comes up. It's yeah, that's part of your legend. There's a whole lot more. All the different breaks that you did, all the different throws that you incorporated. So the fifth degree test, I think, was the big one at the Civic Arts Center. Was that what that one was?
Yeah, I think that's where it was. That was one where Pat Johnson stopped by and he ended up signing my certificate, and I think Mr. Chikawa was awarded his Grandmaster status at that point.
Hmm.
But yeah, that was a big deal for everybody
Yeah.
else.
Yeah, well, I think we had all of the schools at that time, from the area at least, were represented, and we all kind of put together our own little performances from each school. So I remember that. So it was your fourth degree that I was your throwing dummy that day.
You were my partner, yes.
Well, sure. That was a good time. Very good. Love. I have so many great memories. You visited the school. Gosh, I don't know, maybe 10 years ago. It was a while ago, but I remember having you walk in, and I was able to introduce you to all my students. And now on video, I talk about you a lot, and talk a lot about things that you taught me, things that were incorporated. Again, the story with Tang Soo Do University. So it's really cool for my students will have this opportunity to kind of learn a little bit more about me, through you, in some ways, some of that sadistic humor of what we call workouts and different training methods.
Hey, that's the old guy that Master Flame keeps talking about.
Right. The old guy. Yeah. I don't know. You're still looking pretty good though. Hey, so a lot of these black belts, back in the day, had schools. Mr. Cox, Conrad, Tiffany Wing. Everybody was opening schools at the time, and you had a school in Simi Valley. As a matter of fact, I'll bring up a name you'll probably remember, Randy Berman.
Yeah.
Right? So Randy Berman is actually testing for sixth degree this coming Saturday. I mean, he came over to me in 1996, and one of the first names that he brought up was, "Oh yeah, I trained with Bryan Nann," and then he went on to train with Bob Burbich and Steve Conblatt. Those guys. That's where he originally got his black belt, but after that, he came over here and trained with us. He brings your name up a lot. Talks a little bit about that Simi Valley school. So talk about opening that school. What was the motivation behind that? Who were some of the people involved in helping you with that?
So there was two schools in Simi Valley. The original one was opened by a guy named Gary Ruskin, and Gary was kind of dare I say, old school. He was from Mr. Chikawa's time, black belt, and to this day, I mean, gosh, I was a college kid and 18, 19 years old, so it's kind of hard to remember that far back. But Gary, he opened that school. He asked me to be his head instructor, and then some of the students, and again, the names escape me. Oh gosh, the gentleman, the big guy that trained at TO for a while with you at the rec center. He
Oh,
was
Jeff Washington.
Jeff Washington. There you go. I'm like,
That was
why?
my first
I,
class ever. He was my first instructor when I took at the rec center. Biggest dude ever.
yeah, no, Jeff was a great guy. So So what happened was, fast forward, Gary Ruskin ended up getting out of the business. I don't remember the details, but it was fairly quickly, and that school closed, and Jeff Washington and some other students became kind of the investors in a new school, which became the one on Tapo Street, I believe was the one you're thinking of. And they asked me to help them run that school. So I became, again, kind of the head instructor of that school. And I did that for several years. In fact, I was, I ended up going to college down in San Diego. They asked me to come help them run the school, and that was my motivation for moving back to LA. I transferred to Cal State Northridge so that I could help run the school, and that's how I ended up there in SEMI.
So what was your plan originally? Going through high school and getting ready to go to college and stuff. What was your plan? What were your goals?
Gosh, I I wanted to own my own business, right? I wanted to be my own boss. I took the cues from watching Mr. Ichikawa and some of the other school owners in Los Angeles, and I'm like, okay, I want to be that person. And I started teaching while I was in high school, and the goal was to get to, I guess, a point somewhere along the same lines as either what you're doing today with your schools. I think you have a couple of schools at this point, don't you?
Just one. My brother has a school. I had
Okay.
two schools at one time, but closed that probably 12 years ago.
And Terry Brumley became influential on me as well in terms of scaling, the martial arts school, and so that was kind of, I wanted to do that. And then I had these other thoughts, eventually, like you said, Mark Cox and I started the martial arts supply company, and I wanted to kind of rival your friends at Century Martial Arts and go after that kind of piece and build a kind of all encompassing martial arts type of organization. And, the truth be told, at 20, 25 years old, I really didn't know what I didn't know about running a business, which, I subsequently realized when I got into learning how to really run a company. And that was probably the piece that was missing from the equation that led me to where I'm at today.
Hmm. And talk about that transition, because you did open another school in Georgia, correct?
Yes.
And that's where that was kind of maybe your longest tenure as a school owner, right?
Yeah, I mean, if you look at it in terms of owning a brick and mortar school versus doing private instruction, my private instruction career will probably span much longer
Hmm.
than school ownership. But yeah, I think it was 1994. It was after the big earthquake. I ended up moving to Georgia, and how I got there is a whole nother conversation. Um, but I did open a school. It started off really well. I was probably within the first year close to 100 students, um, and had a nice growth trajectory. But I was a young guy, and like I said, in my mid 20s, didn't understand things like intellectual property rights, non-compete clauses, and HR related issues, things
Right.
things that go into running a real company. And truth be told, like I said, what I didn't know that I didn't know ended up kind of hurting me from a business perspective, and that business ended up closing.
Yeah. Well, I remember you did a lot of private lessons. As a matter of fact, I modeled a little bit after you on that, where I basically saw the opportunity to teach once or twice a week in the school was an opportunity for me to grow my private lesson based. If I taught classes, people would want to do private lessons on the side. And, that's one of the ways that we got connected even tighter, was the fact that you would come to our house and give our family private lessons, and then, more in depth with myself. I remember, another one of your private lesson students, because when you kind of transitioned away from that, Justin Karorian is someone that I remember. I just saw a picture you had with him. Such a cool kid, and I ended up training with him, and then have him come over train at the school. So that was a good time. But I started doing more private lessons. I mean, I remember doing private lessons at 5 a.m. in the morning before I would go to high school, and it just all of that came because I saw how you had this clientele of private lessons and private training students. And so, but from there, you brought up, you opened up. What is the story about Georgia? How'd you get to Georgia? Why did you pick Georgia, go to Georgia, leaving California?
Oh gosh, you, you need to get a couple of martinis in me to get me to talk about that. There was a woman involved. Let's put it that way. And I think a long story short, you keep business, and relationships, relationships, and unless you get really lucky, where you can, your significant other can become your business partner, that it very rarely is a viable situation. They say don't go into business with your family. It's kind of that kind of thing. So
Yeah, I get it. I was one of the fortunate ones. I was one of the lucky ones. My wife is my partner in everything we do, whether it's the karate school, the restaurant, a couple other things, on the horizon. So I totally understand what you mean by that. Well, after Georgia, you came back here, and then you went to Arizona, or did you go from Georgia to Arizona?
well, I went a lot of places, Jason. So I came back to LA. That's when I started my career in the automotive industry. And I ended up, getting to work in a lot of places, everywhere from Los Angeles to Santa Barbara to San Jose. It started a whole new career path for me at that point, and that's where it became difficult to continue the kind of physical training in terms of in a school, because I'm living somewhere else now.
hmm hmm And so, what were some of the things from your martial arts training, or from the martial arts business, or just any of those attributes as you were training, that you took with you into the new career?
Yeah, that's a great question, because I think there was a lot that went with me. I can't say enough good things about lessons learned from the martial arts, and I say that not just in respect of physical skills, but like teaching, for example, right? Just the fact that you have to get up in front of a room full of people from you know all different age groups, all different walks of life, all different economic brackets, and you have to command the room essentially, right? Because that's
hmm
you're the authority,
Right.
and you have to learn how to speak and carry yourself and articulate topics so that everybody in that room can understand. Because not some people, and that's where I learned about kind of the how the different learning styles, physical or visual, auditory, kinesthetic, right? I learned that from martial arts, because some folks, you can show them a technique and they get it and they go, okay, it's like this, and then they throw the kick at you, you got it. Other people, you have to walk them through the steps. Pick up your knee, turn your hip over, right? And all those, and the others, you have to, as you know, you have to grab their knee, extend their leg, and bring it back. And just that little lesson alone, of course, in the business world, you can't pick up people's legs and pull on them.
You
But
probably can't touch them at all.
no, that's one of those HR lessons, right? That I learned. But the idea of everybody has a different learning style. Some people you can show them, some people you have to talk them through it. Others have to get the emotional connection to the subject matter. That was a very powerful lesson for me in terms of the business world, because here I am in situations where I'm teaching people how to run companies, or how to do specific operational skills. And everybody in the room has a different learning, mindset, skill set, background. And for me, that was an invaluable lesson that had nothing to do with physical techniques, right? It was just from being on the mat teaching people.
Mm-hmm. So talk about the first step, getting in that career, and whether we mention the company's names or not, what was your first step when you made that transition? How did you go about looking for that new career, or did the career find you?
That's an interesting story too. So, I was looking for a job, and it ended up being an ad in the LA Times. And I kind of cheated because my brother had been with the company that I ended up going to for several years. I won't mention their name. I'm not going to get not give anybody a free plug. But he'd already done very well for himself. So I ended up applying for a management trainee job with this company. I probably got the interview because my brother already had a very, potent reputation, or a influential reputation in this company. Hey, you take the wins where you can get them, right? Again, give credit where credit's due. But, I ended up getting that job. It got me into the automotive industry. And that became probably, a tremendous education of a different kind, because like I said, I really had no idea how much I did not know about running an organization, building an organization, running an organization, operational excellence. I go on and on and on. And just running a company is a lot more, for a martial arts school, is a lot more than just showing up and teaching class every day, like, as you know, right?
Right. Yeah, totally.
So, developing, coaching employees, HR related issues, what happens when instructors don't show up? What do you do with intellectual property for instructors that try to set up shop down the street from you, right? That kind of thing. Sure.
Oh yeah. Yeah. It's all out there, right? It's all part of the deal, right? Kind of
Yep.
part of the risk too. So you with that company for how long?
I was with them for 12 years.
Okay.
Yeah.
And what was the next step, and why did you move on? Were you looking for a change? Were you looking to grow? What was the opportunity there for you?
Kind of all of the above. So, fast forward, this was probably one of the most pivotal, other than getting my black belt and kind of, when they say you've hit the first step, this was probably one of the most pivotal moments in my life in general. 2009, I had spent 12 years with this company. As you know, right about that time was when the financial crisis was at its peak.
Mm-hmm.
And my boss at the time sat me down. I'll never forget. It was at the Cheesecake Factory on Almaden Expressway in San Jose, California, where he basically sat me down at the table and said that, for all practical purposes, that I was becoming obsolete as an employee. And the scary part about that, I mean, everything, that person aside, the scary part was that, Jason, there was a lot of truth to what he was saying. So by 2009, I had spent a decade dumping, all of my blood, sweat, and tears into this organization, into work, climbing a corporate ladder, right? And again, the goal, I'm looking for a bigger, picture goal, right? To become an executive and that type of thing. And, by 2009, I had spent over a decade doing that. I was almost 50 pounds heavier than I am now. I hadn't been physically training, kind of alienated many of my social relationships, and I'd spent a decade working on everything but me,
Mm-hmm.
having chest pains. So, uh, and my wife, you're talking earlier about being lucky. I've been extremely fortunate to have found, won the wife lottery, and I guess, and found my best friend and partner.
Mm-hmm.
Um, because she was extremely patient when, I was frankly going through a tough time. So, we were living up in Northern California at the time. We decided to make kind of a full gear shift, life shift. And that's when we, packed up. We moved to Arizona. I changed companies. So I left that company, and again, we shook hands. I left on my own terms, and uh, looking back, I'm actually very grateful that individual did the things that he did, because it forced me to reevaluate, what life and my life was all in, my career was all about, and um, you know, overnight I lost 40 pounds. And I swore I was never going back. And many of the things that I do today, and kind of the principles that I live and work by, came about because of that time. And I really wouldn't trade it for anything in the world.
During the course of climbing the corporate ladder, so to speak, and you working your way up, was there ever a time that you wish that you would have stayed as an entrepreneur, stayed as a small business owner yourself, be your own boss kind of thing? Or was there a shift in your mindset in what you were doing?
I don't have any regrets about any of those stages of my career. Like I said, I think each step of the way, I would, when people ask me about a major career failure in my life and what I learned from it, I think owning my own business, I can say, looking back, that it failed, right? It didn't succeed. I'm not, I look at what you're doing and call that a success, or what Mark Cox has been doing for all these years. But I learned very valuable lessons, and it forced me into another stage that allowed me to learn more. And I don't regret. And if you're asking me, would you want to own your own business again? Yeah, it would be nice. And we actually, my family, we do have our own family business now that's has nothing to do with martial arts or anything of that nature. But I think owning my own company, if I had it to do it all over again, I would probably do things quite a bit differently. Investors and the intellectual property piece, and everything that goes with it. But I realize that I see all these guys that do these startups. I've come across executives that have gone through a half a dozen different startups. They got all these creative ideas, and I've never been. That's never been me. I've not been. I can run large organizations, but I have not. Since those days, coming up with martial arts equipment and stuff like that, it just, those ideas of how to take a widget and turn it into a company, just maybe I don't have time for that these days, but they just don't come to me. And owning my own company is, I guess, less of an interest to me right now.
Mm-hmm. Well, so talk a little bit about what you're doing now in your career.
Yeah, and that's, I guess, the beauty of what I'm doing right now is I am building a brand new organization, but at the same time, I don't have to say, it's mine, and I don't tell the IRS that it's mine or anything like that. So I am I run global logistics for an electric vehicle manufacturing company called ElectraMeccanica. And it's a startup EV company. They are headquartered in Vancouver, Canada, but our U.S. operations is being built here in Mesa, Arizona. And the really exciting thing for me is twofold. One is the idea of building a large organization from scratch. So I get to do the whole you're owning your own business organizational development piece, and the concept of new transportation modes, reshaping the transportation ecosystem. I know EVs are a hot topic; everybody's doing that, but this goes beyond that because it's not your average. This is not a Tesla or a or a Nissan Leaf. It's a new kind of vehicle, and we're trying to reshape the transportation ecosystem, which is really cool.
Awesome. And so, and you love your job.
Yeah, no, it's very exciting. I love the product. We've got a fantastic team. It feels like a family-run business, but it's a publicly traded corporation, and really, it's just a phenomenal group of people and a phenomenal product, and it's a heck of a lot of fun to drive. So if you ever get a chance to test drive one, I recommend it.
Nice. Well, next time I'm out, I'll come check you out.
Yeah.
Talk about your family a little bit.
My wife and I have been married going on 19 years now. Like I said, she's my best friend and partner. We actually met in the automotive industry. I think that's probably one of the best gifts that I take away from my early days in the auto. Before today, that before 2009 point. We do just about everything together. So from family time, outdoors, you name it. She really is my best friend and partner. My son turns 22 in January. Yeah, I know, right? And he's in school, working, trying to navigate a post-COVID world as a 20-year-old. One of the unique parts of our family dynamics is my son at age 4 was diagnosed with high functioning autism. So we've navigated the topic of special needs, I guess is the politically tactful term, over the last couple of decades. So we've been extremely fortunate. My son's come a long ways. Like I said, he works, goes to school. You would just think he's a typical 20-year-old that spends half of his day in front of a screen. So.
Yeah. Well, having said that, and we work in martial arts with a lot of children, high functioning autism, ADD, ADHD, all these different challenges that maybe when we were training, either we didn't recognize it, we didn't understand it, we just didn't know. Right? What are some of the challenges that you had that you kind of learned more about his needs?
I guess the things that we'd learn is, when they talk about spectrum, number one, when they say things like autism or Asperger's or spectrum behaviors, you're talking about a very broad spectrum of I guess, diagnoses. So, high functioning, like when people think of, there was a time when when people said autism, they thought of Rain Man,
Mm-hmm.
which was up until that point was the only example that people could see and try to relate to with autism. But since then things have changed kind of at a quantum leap level. If you know the name Temple Grandin, she's a famous MIT professor whom they made a movie about her life journey with autism. They've discovered these different variations. Like I said, Asperger's is a different type of behavior, has different characteristics than autism.
Mm-hmm.
They've tried to dispel a lot of the myths about it, so that when I was in our earlier days, and all you heard was that autism was caused by vaccines out of California, and that whole, kids that were vaccinated in Southern California were more likely to get autism, and that was based on a study that was actually a fraudulent study. It turned out that the data was by the author was falsified, and it was later proven to be fraudulent. Yet today, people still try to assert that autism is caused by vaccines. And the fact of the matter is Jason, they really don't know for 100% what causes autism. I can tell you that it has to do a lot of the work we did around blood chemistry, diet, metals and toxicity in the blood that creates blockages to nutrients getting to the brain, which allows for learning. We'll use sugar as a simple example. Part of the regimen one of the regimens that we had our son on was completely trying to eliminate sugar from his systems to normalize behavior. We cut all sugar out of my son's diet, and within about 45 days, there was a marked, not slight, but a marked change in his behavior and ability to focus on schoolwork and social behaviors. So there's something to that. I'm not going to say that that's the answer, but I think everybody would agree a little less sugar in the diet would probably help a lot of things, right?
Yeah, absolutely. No, totally.
Yeah.
Well, thanks for sharing all that with us. I mean, that's some information that like some people just may not even consider, especially if they haven't really been impacted by anybody in their life, and dealing with all of that. I see pictures, and it looks like you guys do a lot of stuff outdoors. Looks like you guys love to go hiking and like you said, being outdoors. I think that's awesome. So
Camping, kayaking, you name it. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, no, and watching it, gosh, 22. That's just crazy. It goes pretty quick though, huh?
Yeah, well, you've got kids. You said you got one that's 19.
Yeah, 19. And she's been in college for let's see, she's done two summer sessions and 3 full semesters. Not a single day on campus yet for her. So we'll see how the next semester goes for her and what happens when she decides to transfer. But yeah, it's kind of interesting, watching your kids grow up having taught martial arts, and I'm sure that you can see the same thing. You look for so many things that you look for when you were teaching martial arts, and when my kids were born, like everything that I knew about teaching martial arts, especially to kids, like almost went out the door because like everything changed. You were pretty use the term old school. A lot of the instructors, had that old school mentality where, we have this standard, we have this bar, and if you're not hitting that bar, like you didn't cut it, and it's just so different, so different. My kids just changed everything about teaching martial arts, my expectations, learning how to praise them. I don't know that we got a whole lot of praise.
Well, yeah, and that's I've grappled. It's funny. I've heard that for years too. You talk about the early days and testing, and to me, I think a lot of that comes back to what your interpretation or your perspective on why you're doing martial arts in the first place. I used to listen to folks in the panel room saying, well, if so and so can't defend themselves, they shouldn't pass their black belt test, or they shouldn't become a black belt. And well, okay, that depends on your perspective or definition of what it means to be a martial artist or what it means to be a black belt. In Japan, in Asia, those are considered just a first step of progress, right? Your martial arts is about developing your potential as a person, both physically, mentally, and emotionally or spiritually, however you want to put it. And if that's the case, then like you said, the whole idea of helping bring out a person's potential is part of what martial arts is. Combat is a different subset of that. If you're doing martial arts to be, the toughest fighter in the world, then that's fine, but that's a different thing. You should probably go be a Navy SEAL, because that's what combat looks like today. People don't get out in the street in toe box or gis and fight each other with a sword anymore. That's not why you're doing, at least from my perspective, that's not why you're doing martial arts. And to say that person's not ready to progress onto the next step because they can't take a kick to the chin without their jaw breaking it or whatever, get knocked out. Well, that's kind of silly in my perspective.
Hmm. Yeah, well, I agree with you. It all goes back to why are you doing martial arts? I mean, we have people that are doing martial arts, to lose weight. They're doing martial arts to have that connection with other people, the social connection, building confidence, discipline, focus. I mean, when you look at a 3-year-old, you're not really teaching them martial arts. You're just teaching them how to listen and how to focus and how to, the basic stages of teamwork. So I agree with that 100%. It just all depends on what is your reason for martial arts and growing to the next level. I mean, everybody starts somewhere. If
Yeah.
I can keep you training in martial arts longer, I can help you longer. One of the things that I see is that when maybe our standards or whatever it is, or when someone quits martial arts, no matter the reason, I'm no longer part of their growth or helping them. So I want to do my part of helping them grow to that next level as much as we can, whatever it takes to, help them, uh, you know, be focused on their goals or to stay motivated or to learn how to have the discipline to get to that next level.
Yeah, and everybody follows a different developmental path too. I think that's an interesting question I always get is do you still train or are you still a martial artist? And I don't think you ever stop. Again, this is just my perspective. Again, if it's about bettering yourself physically, mentally, and emotionally, there's a mental. That was always one of my issues with certain thought processes about training is that it's all physical, right? And we don't spend enough time on kind of the mental part or the philosophical part. And I ended up getting my undergraduate degree in Eastern philosophy. Now, again, that's just me, but because I wanted to understand a little bit of the history behind the culture, as that martial arts stemmed from, as well as some of the thought process that went along with it too, and it gave me a better understanding of other things. You talk about things I took into my business career. The idea of being flexible with different thought processes in the business world. Part of that came from, Eastern thought of kind of, the reed bending in the wind. I know, and that sounds kind of cheesy and esoteric, but there is a practical application to those kind of things. So.
Hmm. Yeah. Awesome. Well, hey, thanks to everybody that's been watching. I don't know if you can see the comments on your side, but
Yeah.
David Starachi, Rio Altai, Mark Cox, Darren Hassan actually plugged your company with a link there. I don't know if you guys work together. Do you know Darren Hassan?
No, Danny Hassan.
No, not Danny Hassan.
No.
No, this is actually one of our students, one of our parents, but interesting. Might have a connection there. But
Oh,
anyway, thanks again to everybody watching and commenting. And, I just want to finish with just, a few seconds reminding you, Mr. Nann, that for me, growing up as a teenage kid who, you probably remember, maybe you don't, but like I did not have a whole lot of direction as far as what I wanted to do in my life. I wasn't really sure. And of course, as a teenager, most people don't. I look at my kids and they're kind of figuring it out, but it was because of people like you that steered me in the direction to do what I'm doing now. You had a direct hand in my love for martial arts, the discipline that it took to do what I do, the knowledge that you shared with me. I was just very fortunate to be surrounded by, such amazing martial artists and people that brought the best out in me and made me believe that I could do it. I will say that you asking me, even though it never happened, you asking me to become a head instructor at a school that wasn't even open yet, that was a huge boost in my confidence that, I don't know that I could ever repay that or tell you enough what that meant to me then, and just the time that you spent with me and poured into me to make me a what I think is a pretty well-rounded martial artist. It was always, it was one of the most impressive things about you is that you were good at fighting and self-defense and all that stuff, but you were really sharp in forms too. You were like the whole package. So, just thanks for all those early years of pouring time into me and believing in me. It made a huge difference, and I'm fortunate to be able to continue to do what I do because of your help. So thank you.
Thank you, Jason. The honor has been mine for sure, and I'm very proud to see you have become the martial artist and the businessman and the community leader that you are today. So my hat's off to you.
Well, I think we all try to do great stuff and inspire people. That's what this video series is all about, is inspiring others, motivating others. What I'd love to do is just give you maybe a few seconds just to share some inspiration with all the viewers, as far as, if when you're talking to your team or you're talking to your employees and you're talking about going to that next level, what's your best advice for them?
Stay relentless, stay agile. Everybody that I've researched over the last 15 years has, had some kind of relentless approach and a purpose behind it, whether you call it a Bushido code or a philosophy or whatever, but formulate your own kind of code for operating in your life and your business. Stay relentless, and my father taught me to never quit, never give up, because there is a solution out there. And in the age we're living in today, agility is probably the best weapon that you could have in life and in business. And that's the ability to either pivot quickly, solve complex problems with creative ideas, and remaining flexible.
Awesome. Well, thanks for all the advice. Thank you for sharing your stories and just spending an hour with me today. It's always great to catch up, and I just want to remind everybody to keep watching. We got some great guests coming up. Taking a look at the next couple of weeks, we got Mr. Jay Walker coming up next week. We got Chong Park, Nathan Carlin, Ricardo Laborio. We get to the Jason and Adam Kiefer, Rich Grogan, and Ali Albarigo to close out the year. And just to let everybody know, I have made the decision that I will continue these interviews throughout 2022. So I'll be looking to reach out to some more guests and hoping to share their stories with you as well. So once again, Bryan Nann, thank you so much for everything. Thanks for sharing the time with me today. And I hope to catch up and see you again soon.
Mr. Flame, it was my pleasure.
All right. Well, I'll send you a link of this video and we'll catch up another time.
All right. Take care.
All right. Thank you guys. Thanks for watching, and make it a great week.
Bye, everybody.
Bye-bye.